The Odyssey by Christopher Nolan. This is my part 2 about this film. And in this second part, I'm going to be talking about how the right reacts to this film. Now, if you haven't seen part 1 of my 2-part reaction, or I guess monologue about this film, then I would really recommend that you do so, because whatever I talk about in this video about the right is going to be, it's directly related to what I had said about the left in part 1. So part 1 was very much focused on how the left reacts to this film, the kind of things they say, and my thoughts about that. In this second part, I want to talk about the right, because as I had said at the end of the first part, the right isn't exactly a pack of angels. They're not so innocent. I have things to say about them, and actually, I think this video might be even longer than the last one, because the right is, I don't want to say they have more issues, but they have a grand narrative about their whole world is a grand narrative about themselves. And I'll talk about that in a second. And unlike the left, which doesn't really have a grand narrative, it's harder to discuss them without talking a lot and explaining some things. So let me do that. And by the way, thank you for your reaction to my last video. I'm glad there's people liked it. Although I hope you guys understand that, I'm not trying to be like just right wing or just left wing. I don't want to be just partial, 100% one side or the other side on this issue. My personal opinions, they kind of oscillate between one, like the left, like liberal, conservative, depending on the issue, and I don't like to consider myself or even other people as fully just conservative or fully just liberal. That's just not, it's not realistic, first of all. So, I criticized the left in my last video, and now I'm going to criticize the right, because there is much to say about the right as well. And I hope this isn't going to be considered immaturely by people, let's say, who support the right. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that now. So as I discuss this, remember, the focal point of these videos is ancient Greece, right? Or you can say, by connection, Nolan's film. But it's really about ancient Greece and how we perceive ancient Greece, how we perceive Greek culture, whether ancient or today, and the people. And I've given you an idea of how the left perceives ancient Greece and Greek people. So now I want to talk about the right, and actually about the right and the way that they approach ancient Greece. There are some similarities with the left in the way they do this, except, there are similarities, but then there are major differences too. So this is how the right likes to talk or perceive ancient Greece. The right likes to consider the world, their world, in grand narratives. And the main thing that they focus on in this grand narrative, I think some of you might already be able to guess, is Western civilization. Okay? Western culture, Western people and values. Okay, these really grand ideas about Western ancestors and the Western past. See, the concept of the West, which a lot of leftists reject and claim isn't real, it's a valid thing. Okay, the West is a real thing. But while there is a cultural, historical, religious, let's say, and philosophical ties between a lot of these countries that are considered in the West, right? Which is mostly Europe and the United States and Canada, let's say. But still, the idea of the West it's very limited and artificial. If anything, it's a loose federation of ideas and not something wholly concrete. So think about this for a little bit. Before the idea of the West, we had a different idea to describe this collection of European countries. We used to call it Christendom. That was the term, Christendom. It was a religious categorization of countries, mostly in Europe, but it also included some Middle Eastern countries because there were a lot of Christians there as well. The Byzantine Empire, Anatolia was Christian before the Turks came in there. But over time, that term Christendom, it declined and fell out of use. And instead, the West came to be used. I mean, what is it exactly? Is it a civilization? Is it a culture? Is it an empire? Is it Europe and America? Is it like the British Commonwealth countries? Like, what about Russia and Eastern Europe? Are they part of the West? What is it that actually unifies the countries in the West? For example, I heard Jordan Peterson once say that Russia is part of the West. Russia and Ukraine. He said something strange. He said that there's a civil war within the West right now. That this Ukrainian war is actually a civil war in the West. Which is really odd, because if you ask Russians, let's say, most Russians are not going to tell you that they consider themselves as part of the West. I think a very small minority of Russians might say that. Most of them are going to say, no, we're not the West. Actually, the West is our enemy. Everybody has their own view of what that word means. What is it that actually unifies the countries in the West? And then who decides that? To be honest, a lot of ideas and countries that are brought together or collected to make this concept of the West, sometimes it just seems artificial to me more than anything else. Now, how does this relate to the Odyssey? Just to get back to the main topic of this video. The thing is, the same artificiality kind of applies to ancient Greece and its relation to the West. Okay, what I mean by that is, among the right-wing circles online, you can clearly see this sentiment which runs like this. Ancient Greece is part of the West. It's part of Western culture, and films like Nolan's are an insult and humiliation to us. They're trying to erase our past and history. Us and our. And the funny part is, this would be coming from some white WASP guy, I don't know, living in Utah, and his name is like Warren. Okay, his background is not Greek at all. Maybe his background is German, or maybe British, right? Or Danish or something. And I just have to ask, how exactly did ancient Greece become part of your past, Mr. Warren from Utah? Not to say anything bad about anyone named Warren. I'm just thinking of a random, waspy name that you might often see in America. You claiming the history of the Greeks as your own. Like, how are you, or how can you claim the myths and the cultural achievements of the Greeks? They have like 2,000 years of history that is separate from yours. Like, so how can you claim that as your own? You live in Utah or Minnesota. Your background, it could be somewhere from Northern Europe, right? Norwegian or Scottish or something. And you got no connection to Greece, bro. But democracy, it was invented in Greece. And we have it too, in our country. In Western world, in America. You claim to have adopted a system of government by the name of democracy. But I bet you don't even know what it actually was in ancient Athens, where it came from. But you claim that your past includes the Greeks? Or let's say you're French. I'm not going to just harp on Northern Europeans like British or like Norwegians or Swedish. Let's say you're French. France believes in democracy today, right? But are you sure you want to cling on to only ancient Greece in that sense? Because, like, aren't you forgetting your own long history of monarchy in France? 1,000 years of history of monarchy. What about clinging on to that? That was part of the majority of France's history. But no, apparently we're going to put that aside, create a new identity. We are the West, Western civilization. We're democratic since, I don't know, maybe 200 years ago when America was created. And we don't like to talk about what happened before that because it doesn't fit the narrative that we want to perpetuate about the West and Western culture and individual freedom and liberty. Again, all products pretty much of the last 200, 250 years of the Enlightenment. But what about the last 2,000 years before that? Well, we're just going to pick and choose whatever fits our narrative. That's kind of what I mean. Western culture is not a concrete thing. Don't make it. Okay, I'm not telling you what to do, but I wouldn't recommend that you make quote-unquote Western culture as your identity. Actually, I just thought of something. I finished recording the video, and then here I am. I just parked because some idea came to my head. It's about the West. So think of it like this. The reason why I criticize the idea of the West, because it's almost the same as saying this. So Greece is situated in the Eastern Mediterranean. Imagine that we take that region and all the people that live there, and I'm talking about ancient Greece, okay? So like the Athenians, the Spartans, the Thebans, etc., the Macedonians, then you have like the Lydians, all the Phrygians, the Pontics, Armenians, and you go down south to like Syria, like the Phoenicia, right? People who spoke Aramaic, the Jews who were living in Judea, and then you go westward toward Egypt, right? Imagine like, okay, so that region, and we know that people there had shared a lot of similar cultural norms. There was quite a bit of similarities culturally, and those people traded with each other a lot, right? So Greece was firmly part of that world I say this later on in the video they are watching, but they were firmly in that world, or they were much more connected to that world than to like Gaul or to Germania or to Britannia or Iberia, right? So it's like if we took that Eastern Mediterranean world where Greece was situated and we were like, oh, this is the Eastern Mediterranean civilization. Do you understand what I mean? Like we took all those countries and said, oh, that's the Eastern Mediterranean civilization. That's the same thing as what we do now when we say Western civilization. We're like, yeah, we're going to take all these countries in in Western Europe. We're going to include North America. We will include even like Central and Eastern Europe, and potentially even Russia, according to Jordan Peterson. Some people even say, oh, Japan is part of the Western world, which is absurd to me, completely absurd. And then, yeah, that's all Western civilization. Do you know what I mean? I think the problem, I know we have this strange desire to make a claim that this part is this civilization, that part is that civilization. Maybe that's the influence of Samuel Huntington. I don't know. But I think I don't think it's useful. And I think we potentially, and that's what I try to do. I try to think of the world less in civilizations, okay? I try to think more in nations. The world is composed of nations, not civilizations. So the Greeks are one nation. The Danes are another nation, right? Maybe there are similarities. Maybe there are some historical ties, right? But that doesn't mean that they are part of a civilization. That's the thing. For some reason, we keep trying to, shove this country and that country into one civilization or another one. And I don't think that's necessary. I don't even think that's necessary. Like, why are we doing that? Why does Greece have to be part of the Western civilization? Greece is a nation. Isn't that more important, right? That's what it is. England is a nation. The British, I guess you could say, are a nation. Although that's kind of more debatable, because British versus English, Scottish. Anyway, I don't want to go into that. That's the point I want to make. It's saying Western civilization is absurd as saying that Greece in the ancient world was part of the Eastern Mediterranean civilization, which we firmly would reject. We wouldn't say that there was an Eastern Mediterranean civilization. But yet, if we try to use the same kind of definitions or the same approach to that ancient position that Greece was holding as we do to like a country in the modern world that we say is part of the West or the Western civilization, then we should be able to say, yeah, Greece then was part of the Eastern Mediterranean civilization, but we don't. So why do we do it for one and not the other? What's really the difference? Is it empire? Is it like, like if you're part of an empire, you're part of a civilization? Well, but then that's not really civilization, is it? Like the Roman Empire obviously was an empire, and we say the Roman civilization, right? But was Mauritania part of the Roman civilization, or was it part of the Roman Empire, right? Which we shouldn't get confused in these things. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say, having stopped here during the drive. If you want a concrete identity, look to your national culture. There you have a clear identity. There you have a culture, a history. And the Greeks, that's what they do. They could do it very easily. Okay? And these myths are a part of that. They're not really yours if you're like British, or if you're like a white American, or if you're a Swede. They're not yours. Don't take that stuff and create some, like some Anglo-Saxon version of it, which is what Nolan has done. And what you have been doing too for over the past 200 years. So that you can enforce a sort of propaganda. Sometimes it was imperial propaganda about yourselves. Ancient Greece was a civilization that, this is what it really was. It was a civilization that straddled Europe and West Asia. It was situated in the Eastern Mediterranean, right? That's where Greece is located. Look at a map, right? You had different empires and kingdoms. It was firmly part of that Eastern Mediterranean world and the cultures that existed there. It shared much more with the people living in that region, which included the Egyptians, ancient Egyptians, Phoenicians, who were in Syria, and various peoples living in Anatolia. There were a bunch of different cultures there, that's in modern Turkey. The Greeks shared much more with them than they did with the Gauls in modern-day France, or the Germanic tribes, or the Britons in Britannia. But the right seems to want to kind of ignore that aspect of Greece, ancient Greece. Because if they were to really see what the Greeks were actually like, they might feel a little awkward, because they would seem, I don't know, a little maybe Middle Eastern or Oriental, with their language and the music and food. Even today, think about Greek music. It's a little bit Oriental, you could say, when I say Oriental, depends on which country you're in. It means different things, but it seems a little Eastern, doesn't it? It doesn't sound like a Western European style of music. Just listen to traditional Greek music, folk music. I'm not talking about modern pop stuff. That sounds the same everywhere. I'm talking about traditional Greek folk music. Listen to it. Does that sound like something from Western Europe? Does it sound similar to something from Western Europe? I don't think so. And then listen to music from Turkey, from, I don't know, Lebanon, Syria. You might find that the style of music, the Greek music, it's closer to that stuff than it is to something from, I don't know, Ireland or from France. That goes, by the way, for a lot of the music in the Balkans. There is that Eastern aspect to it. Now, of course, Balkans is also, there's a lot of Slavic stuff there too. Greece doesn't quite have those Slavic elements, but in any case, it's different, okay? And the right, it seems to me, kind of tends to ignore that, because that doesn't fit their narrative of the West, okay? The West is not... I mean, if you look at the contours of the West, if you look at how they paint that image of the West, what you see in Greece today, for example, and if you actually study Greece, ancient Greece, the history, it doesn't quite fit that image of the West, okay? The West, as it is, it's very, I don't know if people would like this or not, but it's a very Anglo-Saxon, Western European concept, where the Anglo-Saxons and the Western Europeans are the center of it, okay? And then they take other cultures, whichever ones they could use to support their own image and to further develop and enhance their image, okay? And that's what they've done with Greece. As far as I can tell from Nolan's film, just to get back to that, there's nothing to show the Greeks in that Eastern Mediterranean context. I don't see that at all. And most of the right in North America and Northwestern Europe, they also miss this, because Greece, has to be part of their Western civilization. So anything in Greek culture, past or present, that doesn't fit that, the Northwestern European, American, British dominant idea of the West, it's ignored, it's overlooked, and ultimately potentially forgotten. So that's my problem with the right. Okay, they do these propagandistic things. They make these propagandistic narratives. It was probably the British who really solidified and consolidated that propaganda narrative. And then after the British Empire fell, I think that's when the concept of the West took over, which took off in the 20th century. But anyway, at the end of all this bickering between the right and the left, I kind of have to ask, what about the Greek people themselves? Has anybody spoken to them about any of this? Like, what are they left with? To watch foreigners either steal or appropriate their cultures for these grand propaganda narratives, as the right does, or try to rewrite and convert their culture into a fantasy like the left? Because both those sides basically treat the Greeks like they don't really matter. I'm not saying that everyone online is like this. There are plenty of people who were advocating for Nolan's film to portray the late Bronze Age, like late Bronze Age Greece accurately. And plenty of people were reasonable about it. Like they would say, yeah, why can't Nolan portray the late Bronze Age, with at least some accuracy, right? It doesn't have to be exactly this, exactly like it doesn't have to be perfect. Of course it doesn't have to be perfect. It's a movie after all, right? One of the main purposes of a movie is to entertain. So let him make an entertaining film. It doesn't have to have all historical elements of it exactly right. Because a film could be great without being historically perfect. Film studios have to make money, so they have to entertain in the end. And there's plenty of people online who are talking about this and who are advocating for this, for being reasonably historical but also entertaining. And you could take artistic license in adding anachronistic things to the film, right? Adding the gods and in whatever form you like, right? Creatures, just as long as you can capture the spirit of the myth properly, right? That's the most important thing. For example, the film Troy, it did a wonderful job at that. I love that film. It captured the spirit of the legend of the Iliad. It was full of inaccuracies. It was, from a historical perspective, there's tons of stuff you could say about it. Some, like, things were anachronistic, some of it was just made up. But that didn't really matter. Because when you were watching it, it felt authentic. You felt like you were in late Bronze Age Greece. And the characters felt accurate. Achilles felt like Achilles. Hector felt like Hector. Helen felt like Helen. Were there things I wish the films had included? Of course. Of course it could have been better. But even without that, it was a successful film in my opinion. Now, if Nolan wanted to, make this film, he wanted to reimagine it, because obviously he doesn't just want to make the same film that was done by Wolfgang Petersen, right? Back in, 2001 or something when they made Troy. If Nolan wanted to reimagine it, fine, that's his right as a director, as an artist. That's what artistic license is for. I don't think that should be taken away from him. But it doesn't mean that you can reimagine it in any way you like to the point of making it whatever the hell it is right now. Whatever the hell it is he made. I actually kind of wish that the Greek government, in response to Nolan, helps fund like a spectacular production of the Odyssey, just in response to Nolan, just to show the world what the Odyssey should be like, and to tell the left and right-wingers in America and, you know, Britain or Western countries, it's mostly from these countries where this crap is coming from, just to tell them to go to hell. Okay? Because I'm just so sick of how they've been portraying Greece and Greek culture and history and myth. So I hope you enjoyed that. I would love to know your thoughts. Please comment. Please, hey, criticize me. Criticize the hell out of me. If you hate what I said, go on, just unload it on me. You know, I accept the hate. I accept the love and the hate. You're all the same in my eyes. You're all God's children, however you want to refer to yourselves. I would love to know what you have to say. So, hope you have a good day or good night, good evening, and see you in the next one.